So after more than 5 years, we are about to finish the project. We are happy to be on this stage and to be able to share our experience in front of this audience. As part of our transformation program, we have redesigned the process and system landscape in the ERP environment. So it was much more than a purely technical system conversion from R3 to S4. Our transformation program is one of the biggest digitalization IT strategies within the group, with more than 300 societies, companies with over 10,000 users. Internally, internal colleagues within our project core teams, there were 100 of them, and at peak, about 60 external consultants have been involved. We divided our presentation into 3 parts. In the first part, I'm going to talk about the scoping and analysis stage and talk about our selective greenfield approach. In the second part, Nicole Dettinger is going to talk about our experience in project implementation. Then in the third part, Andreas Giraud is going to talk about our architecture, that is, which specific technologies and solutions were used by us. So, our transformation program is called SCORE 25, and our goal was to have a new foundation with this program. And 25 is the year 25. So it's oriented towards the future and a clear orientation towards our group strategy 2025. And yes, at the start, this maintenance announced by SAP was also a factor, but not a significant driver, not our main driver. So rather, it was all about our over 20-year-old monolithic ERP landscape. We wanted it to change, to have a modern platform IT architecture in which we could also use innovation, but at the same time have cloud products. Andreas will show you. We have already some cloud products and to be able to use it. We took the opportunity to change our processes, to simplify them, and to standardize them, a core success factor within our program. So this complexity that had grown over the years, I believe many companies know this. Another important aspect is that together with all subsidiaries of the group, we have found a common management logic for the relevant business models, and with that, a precondition for an optimal data model in S4. So in March 2020, we introduced a new BI platform. It makes a key contribution for operative business, especially bringing together financial figures with non-financial figures. And also, for instance, we have comparable cover amounts and key figures, and we can now talk about them. Another aspect was we not only had one ERP system, but especially we had 4 parts, societies, companies with their own systems, and right from the beginning we integrated those. We have had a new cooperation within our group, and we optimized resources in a sustainable way. But before I'm going to talk about the project contents, I'd like to give you some background fact about us as the EnBW group. So for years, the energy landscape has been changing, and the EnBW with it. In 2013, we set the course for the future. So evolving from a traditional energy company into an innovative and sustainable partner for energy and infrastructure. Our activities can be divided into 3 segments. In our sustainable generation infrastructure segment, we continue to expand renewable energies. Before the Fukushima catastrophe, 80% of our earnings came from conventional generation, so nuclear energy, coal, and gas. And Only 10 years later, it was only 20%, which illustrates this massive transformation in this segment. The core of our system critical infrastructure segment is our transport and distribution grids. Reliable grids are the prerequisites for secure supply and the backbone of the energy transition. In the intelligent infrastructure for customers segment, we bundle, for example, the sale of electricity and gas, the charging infrastructure for electromobility and telecommunications. Now, a few key figures about EnBW. In an extremely challenging financial year 2022, our business model has proven to be robust and resilient. Proof of this are our solid earnings figures. Our adjusted EBITDA is 3.3 billion in 2022, was significantly above the previous year. We will continue to use our operating earnings to accelerate the implementation of the energy transition as the only integrated energy company in Germany, and we bear a special responsibility for this. We have the key factors of the energy transition in mind and are investing in the expansion of renewable energies, in available capacity, and in the grids. Our goal is to become climate neutral by 2035, and after 2028, stop generating electricity and heat with coal. Now, I come back to the content of our SCORE 25 program. So what you see here is not meant to be modern art, but I will now explain our selective greenfield approach with the help of this slide. In the first year of our program, 2018, not the processes or specific tools were at the center, but our capabilities. So with our strategy 2025, we asked the question, what do we need to be able to do as a company? And in this context, business capabilities are in process hierarchy and main process level, so invoices, dispatch, supply evaluation. And in this phase, we have had 170 business capabilities and defined that 80% of those business capabilities are not competitive. So this means this is the part below this line, which you see here in this graph. At the same time, in 2018, we have the S/4HANA sandbox system from SAP, and we defined requirements in workshops with many departments that we worked on, and we worked on this and validated the sandbox system. Back then, as I said, 2018, release 1709, but the first picture was quite sobering. Why? Because we saw the requirements that we defined, only about 30% could be mapped in the S/4HANA standard. At the same time, our general goal was to standardize and to have a product standard. This means we worked strongly that we only moved from the standard, leaving the standard, only if we have an advantage edge. But what do the colors mean? These are three different clusters of business capabilities. The first green cluster stands for the finance cluster. I'm going to return to this on the next slide. So in the end, we saw that in this financial cluster, almost all capabilities are non-differentiating. This means there we had the ambition to have the capabilities from the right cluster to move to the left one. At the same time, we saw topics like BI, planning, forecasting, treasury, and consolidation solutions. And definitely, we were not able to reflect it in S/4HANA. So some things are still in the extended extended core. The blue part stands for the logistics cluster. And here I'm going to elaborate on that as well. What's behind that? Here you see the biggest part of logistics cluster is non-differentiating. So in the financial part, we have a clear greenfield approach to have the benefits of data model and S/4HANA. In logistics, we have had, for instance, material managing, we have brownfield approach, but for e-procurement platform, we have a greenfield approach. Then we have the big portion of maintenance. Here, the processes were like there were no requirements to have a revision. So we have a clear brownfield approach, a one-to-one process adoption. But now a more detailed look at the scope of our program. So we have the cluster of finances, where we have the processes in asset accounting, general ledger, but also new topics like the tools management. Then we have the controlling processes with project control, cost profit accounting, where mainly we build upon the new steering model. And we have the topic of consolidation. And in July, as the pilot customer of SAP, we were very successful in the remote conversion to SAP BCS for HANA. It was a successful stream in our program. Then we have the topic of treasury management, including payment transactions, account management, and liquidity planning. Those are the main topics in the financial cluster. Then logistics cluster. On the one hand, we have the order-to-cash process, so from quoting accounts receivables. Then we have procurement, so from ordering processes, then logistics to accounts payables. Then we have facility management, and especially, so this is the RFFX, where we have the management and leasing standard 16. Next topic, maintenance of SAP PM as a back end of our maintenance operation and construction management, also for the grids for construction. And as I said, it was mainly a brownfield approach. Then we had overarching functions, so BI, we had the operational and commercial management, for the group, so at the group level, and also for the individual business units. And last but not least, the topic of master data management. Mainly it was all about the integrated business partners. So those of you who want to know more today at 5:45 can visit our presentation of our colleagues on that topic. So that was it on the functional scope of our program. So what were the main success factors of this scoping and analyzing phase? First of all, we had to work out clearly which business skills are not competitively differentiating. And in particular, there we needed to cooperate, to work together to bring about radical simplification and standardization. Third point, taking and using the opportunity, or the third point is having a clear end-to-end view. So have cross-functional teams right from the outset to optimize the processes. Fourth point, taking the opportunity to reduce the number of ERP systems in the group. And right from the start, we had a joint project with our core subsidiaries and not 5 different projects in parallel, and especially a cooperation at eye level. That was a success factor as well. Last point, especially revising steering models as an essential guardrail for the optimal design of the data model in S4. So what can I tell you in the end? Those of you who have this ahead of them, I'd like to encourage all those to start working on the project, to standardize the processes. Second, also modernizing IT architecture, make it fit for the future. And third point, to keep the things that are good. This is the main bottom line from our Greenfield approach. So that was the first part. Now let's move on to the second part of our presentation, our success factors on the further project implementation. I'd like to give over to Nicole Dettinger. Thank you, Hubert. Thank you, Hubert. So, success factors during the project implementation. I'd like to start with our decisive success factor for us. And you see this plus sign on the keyboard, and it means departments plus IT. Very important is the department, specialized department, that they work together with the IT. And for that, on the one hand, we have cross-functional project teams. So they have the expertise, the know-how, and also the developing expertise and know-how. So that way, we succeeded to have fast-working teams. On the other hand, we have built tandems, also on the level of project management teams. Seems to be quite trivial and something natural, and I believe many projects plan to do this, but the decisive difference for us was that we succeeded to do it together between the specialized department and the IT till the last moment, and to live it, to instill it with life. Apart from the factor of specialized department and IT, I'd like to give you 4 success factors that were important. First point, topic of management support. In all responsible areas up until the board, we have had this decisive management support. So there was an agreement that a project of this size can only be successful if everyone is cooperating, and our CFO was our project mentor. Second, the active and early involvement of all shareholders, especially, and Hubert talked about this, a majority participation that at the start of the project they had their own SAP system. Apart from them, especially the knowledge in project team was also decisive, which brings me to point 3 and 4. We have had external competence that we invited to the project, especially in S/4HANA implementation, but at the same time, it was really important to us to have internal performance key stakeholder, not partially, but in big chunks of their working hours. And I have to stress involvement of performance stakeholders and a big part of project, and having that externally wouldn't have been as successful. That was it for the success factors for the implementation. So what about the ERP landscape and the 300 companies? How did we involve them? I'd like to show you our project phases. We have divided the project into 4 stages. We started at the beginning of 2018 with a 1-year analysis period where we clarified the what and the why, as Hubert Walterer told you in the first part. After that, we had the second phase, the piloting phase. Here, we had to define our foundation, to implement a prototype, and then at an early stage to have a first company in 2020 that went live. After that, it was the most tedious phase, the third phase of implementation. So in 2 years, we have had the functional scope that we extended and defined so that it was sufficient to bring our companies to the new ERP landscape. So you see on the slide, it was the end of 21 with 5 companies. 5 companies doesn't seem to be a lot, but you have to know those 5 companies, it was 80% of functional scope covered, and with that, at once we have 10,000 users in the landscape that used the system. And this phase was really a big effort for the whole project team. And at the same time, a decisive milestone in our project course. After that, the phase number 4. In this phase, so the remaining 300 companies had to be moved to the new landscape, and for that we took 2 more rounds in January 2023 and now January 2024. And we are on the finishing line, so it's still ahead of that. And then the rest of the 328. What was the experience in this area? So in retrospective, we can clearly say that this go live, so early piloting phase, then the bigger companies, and then the mass of the companies, this base to move them to a new landscape, that was the right thing to do to achieve our goal and to be able to support this greenfield approach. Apart from that, you see here, you see the coronavirus. It was a surprise for us. We had to deal with it. I believe it was 2 weeks before our go-live date, our first go-live, March 2020. The whole team were sent to work from home. And in retrospective, we really thought, can we really go live with this first pilot company, or do we need to postpone it? So in retrospective, we can only smile about that, because with the knowledge that we did everything remote, it worked. And it also worked because from the side of IT, we had the right position, we had the right framework conditions created for this remote work. On the other hand, of course, we had the advantage that as a project team, we already were used in working together and present and personally. So what was our starting point, our position? I'd like to give you an excerpt of the project structure, the project organization. This is based on the idea of cross-functional teams on the one hand, and on the other hand, on the end-to-end process approach. So similarly to the project scope, we have 8 process teams from the perspective end to end, and we staffed them with colleagues from specialized department from IT and 1 responsible process owner, and this way we covered this content level and developed it in the horizontal level that you see on the slide, or the 8 big streams. Parallel to that, and on the vertical, we had work streams, the goal being finding those cross-sectional topics, reflecting it and working on them, and finding the right responsibility teams. For instance, S4 authorization management was reflected like this, and the big topic of migration and cutover, and also test management. So our whole working in this project structure was clearly designed to work in an agile manner. And how we implemented it in the project and which experience we have had, so would be my next topic. Working in an agile manner in SAP projects, can this work? Our experience shows clearly yes, and even more, I would say it was one of our decisive factors within the project. Was this journey easy? Definitely no. And for that, you have to know, I would like to give you the right perspective, that for this whole project team, working in an agile manner was a new thing to do at the right start of the project. Yes, of course, they heard something about it in individual smaller teams. They have made the first attempts, but in this scale, in this dimension, definitely this was something new. So agility, first of all, we had to learn that in the project. We had to learn it. What was our approach to this topic? Methodology at the beginning of the project, Scrum. The project employees have had trainings, agile methods, backlogs, retros, plannings, dailies. So they were introduced and implemented. And we've given ourselves 3-week sprints, joint pace. And then in different teams, We scaled agile working, we steered and managed it, and for that we have element from the SAIL framework that we've been using. I'd like to mention the project increment, PI. We had 12 weeks that were bound together in a product increment, and at the start of this PI, together with the whole project team, we planned the next weeks and clarified the dependencies. And during that, we have the epics, the goals of the product increments and user stories, and for that we used Jira to depict and to track and to steer all of that. So you would think everything's fine, but unfortunately, relatively early on, we saw that this methodology and the scale of it was not sufficient. The reality check showed us the following that we had to work on. First main aspect, agile projects also need a good structure and good planning. On a year level, we have had framework planning. That was the guideline for the whole team. And this way, we have had a clear structure and planning prerequisites. We had the different 300 companies, you may remember, located in the planning to use it. And we realized that there were topics where it doesn't make any sense to do it in the 3 weeks steps. Topics from our experience, the area of migration cutover, but also testing, test management. And some teams, for us, it was legitimate that organized according to Kanban, for instance. A very important insight through the introduction of agile working method, not all problems or working methods will dissolve at the push of a button. So it takes just time till you can cut topics in small portions so that you can work on them within 3 weeks, so that you don't need to work with all balls in the air. So the conclusion, agile working methods, yes, wonderful, but successful factor for the project was not an easy way to work. Agile working is more important than methodology, also important here. The establishing agile mindset and also agile principles. What do I mean? The companies need to be able to work independently, and we need to encourage them to make their own decisions, not arbitrarily, but to give them the framework and orientation and guidelines. So those were the success factors of project implementation. I'd like to finalize and draw a bottom line. So we have had the cross-functional teams. You remember the big plus on the first slide. Specialized department plus IT, internal top performers, the internal know-how, ensuring and developing internal know-how, using those colleagues, incorporating them in this project, then agile working methods. Definitely also in SAP projects have added value, an adapted form. So it's more than just methodology. Then the topic of data migration, also a critical factor in such an S/4HANA transformation project. It needs a clean planning and structurization and process handling. So it was a traditional way. The productive of the companies, as I already mentioned, it was the right thing to do to have our selective greenfield approach to support it. And last but not least, the topic of management support. And with that, we defined our success factors for project implementation. So that was the conclusion. And we also had the topic of architectural perspective. This was also an important factor. Right from the start, we considered it. And on the topic of architecture, in the third part of our presentation, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Andreas.
Scoping, project implementation, all of those are super elements that kept us in motion. I, being the architect, could help together with my team to shape change on the technical side. What needs to be stable in the back end, what has to be quick and agile in the front, and as we said at the beginning, so that we can get something like a reversal of thrust. So at the beginning, we wondered why we are using SAP in the first place. There was a great slide with an explanation. We didn't get agreed about that. But if you take a look at Karlsruhe in real architecture at our corporate headquarters, then maybe some of you will already recognize a well-known pattern. That's our corporate headquarters with our piece of land. And Christian, the answer is easy. We've got a certain unique proposition there of ours. The tip, unfortunately, doesn't reach all the way to Walldorf. On to the architecture now. At the beginning, there was the finding, if we take a look at specialties as outlined by Hubert with the business capabilities, so that isn't in line with the technical side. So how do I map that onto the technology? We noticed earlier, and we've seen with the requirement of being stable towards the end and quick at the beginning, differentiating on the one hand side, but being part of the standard on the other hand side. So the field themes with logistics, finance, maintenance, all of the business capabilities on level 1 and 2. This is what we analyzed. The 170 business capabilities are the essence of our entire finance segment, purchasing, part of the networks and generation, the fields that we then also call maintenance. If we now sort that into the IT, then one will be able to say we do a change of release. We go from the old to the new system. We don't think about capabilities. We just move into the new world. And we quite intentionally took a decision not to embark on this path. We took the time with the specialized department, IT with the specialized department, to think about what accounts for the core and why are we using SAP in the first place. The answer to that was formed by sorting in under this very simple mechanism with a functional validation at the time against 1709. By now, as of October 22 release, we've got a completely different situation. Hubert explained it. At the time, only a part of could be mapped in the S/4HANA standard, but we already knew at the time at our given framework conditions that we have to set up on that with add-on solutions through our partners and our own solutions that we then added on the business process platform of a previous business suite. Transforming that and then mapping it in IT technology requires another integration aspect, where even at the time we had first connections with the sub-cloud platform, the current BTP. The core question then was, what accounts for our core and what is it that we need additionally? And like in the previous case in project implementation and common scoping, the point was that we decided to jointly shape the business and IT architecture. So how do you get the business people in the direction of IT? How do you get the IT people to better understand the technical side, the specialized side, so that the processes and the business capabilities are understood by both, and that you are not too early in talking about IT solutions? This sorting in according to business capabilities first, and then as a second step, according to core components, looking at IT solutions, that was for us a decisive success factor. We then made use of the three quadrants. The 170 business capabilities were broken down by us. We took a look at all of the IT solutions in our Cosmos, and in the rough scope we had 600 applications. In a nearer scope it was still 250. So we had 100 technical systems in front of us that were interwoven with one another, where you didn't know which thread to pull at. How do you get structure into this entire conglomerate? How can you bundle it and newly orientate it? So the second view helped us. So the first view was, what is an S/4HANA standard, and the consistent orientation of asking for making the same things the same, and then asking under this methodology, we leave all of this behind us and we think at the same time what we can add in a way which makes sense. We knew from the very beginning that this wouldn't immediately and always happen with SAP solutions. There are other types of solutions, but the logic then was transferred from the business capabilities, and then we took a further technological look at that. And when it comes to anybody who knows about the context definition will have seen that making these cuts amounts to a key element of designing the architecture. And here, in a short overview, I will go into detail later on with the individual architecture. It's the business process platform S/4HANA for us. It had always been a reliable factor to have stable and reliable business processes, and we were able to map those. But it takes also a meaningful addition going forward with a business intelligent platform, and the determination of the business capabilities produced that clarity, leaving out things that were superfluous, and it produced to us the result that we need in a BI platform or business process platform. This was added to through additional platforms, output management, workflow support, all of the other applications that go around that. And the last major building block is, of course, the development integration. Here again, we've got the principle of protect the core, keep the core clean. Even back then, we trusted in this one code, one platform principle of one that SAP then fortunately enough, still supports with the architectural principles, and we trust in it that this will be carried on and carried forward, which keeps the potential open from the on-premise world to the cloud and going back and making functionalities available, which maybe primarily appear in the cloud, but then hopefully they can also be mapped in the on-premise world. And the result, you are going to see it in just a moment. It's of course difficult to actually show complex architecture in a few minutes. The result will be a volley picture, and I take you along with that. The original architecture is 4 times A0 at the business capabilities 100 systems. Is a big complex picture, but it's kind of fun visualizing that with the team and being able to show which things are localized. So at the beginning, we took a fundamental principle decision. The result of this business capabilities view, IT analysis with the functional validation against the products. So that was the S/4HANA platform, the asset management, well, in part plant maintenance, PM, with a large share of own developments with process adjustment needs was taken into the platform, and the effect for us was ultimately that we have to stay on the on-prem world. We need process flexibility there. We also thought even back then to go into the public cloud, but the functional scope of back then was not that as complete as it should have been and would have been. Additionally then, we have seen the PI platform with BW-4HANA. We put it onto the SAP platform so that the analytical function in financing, accounting, and consolidation could have been mapped. This for us is an important element for dealing with structured data. And a process has come into motion where we were seeing not only the standardization of processes and the integration, but wherever possible, the standardization of data, and the data quality needs to be brought forward. So if you also have the sticker here on premise, it was similar to what we had with the S/4HANA platform. So we cloudified it as far as we could, so that from the operating model and in terms of the infrastructure, we went to the cloud as close as possible. And what happens forward is the perceived software quality. There we saw what in the workplace front-end analytics very early with the SAP Analytics Cloud, We touched upon that so that the backend functionalities can then accordingly be mapped. We rely on Fiori, also with the role and transaction role-based model of SAP, but we also rely on other standards so that the entire user experience looking forward for different target groups can be made available accordingly. It goes on from there, of course, into the cloud. Hubert already hinted at that with treasury solutions. So we looked into that. We looked at whether it can be mapped with SAP, yes or no. In that case, it was kind of a mixed result. The digital payments then were realized with Serala. Other treasury applications were also realized with that. And then in the cloud, the AVAL management and the entire payment transactions through the partner solutions from Kubima and TS. The other applications, so that was 248 minus the other applications that also kept us in motion. For example, mapping the interfaces technically, and especially between the on-premise world and the cloud world. It all needed to be integrated after all. And e-procurement, at the current point in time, as we are looking back, the situation was as follows. So we initially wanted to realize it with SAP Ariba. We then undertook a detailed study, but at the time, there were only 15 purchasing processes that could be mapped there with Ariba and S-Core. That was not complete enough. That led to one of our big tenders, and so we took a different decision then. In the further realization, the glue, the central service of integration between data processes and application, is formed by our integration layer, where we are using process integration, process orchestration in the on-prem world. In the future, then also on the cloud integration from BTP. But we also have got a multi-technology stack available, depending on the integration scenario. That's our basic principles in the architecture. It helps for loose coupling, so that wherever we need flexibility, we can easily get connected, but then also get detached as required. And then the topic goes on. We took a look at how to realize the development environments. How do we do development in the future also with side-by-side development by BTP? One intermediate topic should be mentioned, the topic of architecture. There was the architecture designer in the meantime on the NEO platform. Welcome the decision, and it's a good decision to take in Linux into the product family. We also deal with that, and for us that is also a promising approach. Also, as mentioned earlier, the business compatibilities there, making use of that. And finally, if we take BTP, then as an outlook, further cloud services happen to be added. We've got the AI services not yet placed. That is still in the making. And then, last but not least, the entire operational support, all of the application lifecycle that's behind that. It has to be continued. We've got a wonderful operations team at EnBW that gives us all of the backing so that all of the systems can be operated in a frictionless way. At this point on Thursday afternoon, there will be a presentation from my colleague Timo Eef on change and release management all around the topic of our Score 25 project. That's going to be a very exciting presentation, and I would like to cordially invite you to attend it. So far, now the picture is complete. So in terms of project and program, we're almost through. Next year, we are going to take a look at the finalization, and we hope that we are going to take the next step. In summary, in a nutshell, we can say that architecture is created together with business and IT. We were able to create additional value in IT. So we combined the specialized view and the technical view, verticalization all the way down to the technology stack, which may be different here and there. But then in the outlook with one product strategy, hopefully it can be harmonized. Then this thrust reversal from a monolithic system, moving on to flexible systems, and then further on architecture being developed step by step, making not any architecture for the shelf and not losing the target pattern out of sight. And then finally DSAG here, we enormously benefited from the communities, from the development of know-how. Just an example from software license management. Time and again, there were questions coming up in the highly complex world of the software terms, that there is that statement, you are never sure what's complicated, German tax law or the SAP licensing systems. Well, I let that stand. I'll leave it at that. We've got a very great team. But you're also working on it, aren't you? So, along these lines, let me come to the conclusion. So we had 3 points, our key takeaways that we would like to briefly show you before we then conclude. The first point was, and Hubert hopefully was able to show you well, that a pure system conversion wouldn't have made sense. So we approached matters from the business side. So we created the benefit by taking our framework conditions and coming from a business-driven scoping. Nicole hopefully was able to show you that when it comes to the project implementation, we relied on innovative methods, which were new for us. So working across departments and across companies, taking an agile approach, putting the responsibility on the team, and then creating decisions time and again in this way. And thirdly, I cannot but quote the Agile Manifesto, the best architecture is created in a team. We develop jointly, we implement it jointly. That was another third building block for our success. Now, in conclusion, the 3 of us would like to therefore say very clearly, we are happy to be the 3 who stand in for a major project at EnBW. We stand for more than 130 people who are directly connected. We've got a wonderful team on the technical side, on the specialized side. We implemented with partners, with DSAG, just the same as SAP, our account team that kept supporting us time and again, then dissolving the matter about the licenses, and so on and so forth. We could continue furthermore. The 3 of us would like to say a big thank you to our NBW team, and please give them also a big hand as we say thank you very much indeed for your attention.